So reducing minimum lot sizes for things like duplexes according to state requirements, looking at middle housing and multi-family housing for a little bit of reduction in minimum lot size. We didn't change anything as it related to single unit housing. Revising duplex parking standards to two spaces per duplex rather than 4, and increasing the maximum lot coverage for parcels with an accessory dwelling unit. Those are some of the bigger land use efficiency measures that we worked with the SAC as well as the City Council and Planning Commission on as it relates to development code. The other land use efficiency measures were about looking at land to rezone. So this map is showing you some land that we're talking about rezoning from industrial to commercial, about 68 acres, from residential to commercial, about 8 acres, and then a little bit from residential to public to account for a couple of park changes that you've had. So most of these are from industrial of some sort to commercial, or this one here from moderate density residential to commercial, to EC. So one of the things to know is that we're not talking here about industrial land, and that's because Scappoose has enough industrial land in all the scenarios to accommodate expected growth. Even after the changes that we're showing here on the map, Scappoose has a surplus of 140 industrial acres over the 50-year period. So that's why we're not talking about more industrial land. So in looking at these land use efficiency measures, especially the rezone of about 51 acres of industrial land to commercial land at the north part of Scappoose along Highway 30 and up near the airport, the SAC members raised some comments and concerns about them. There are concerns about concentration of a large share of future commercial land under one landowner in the north end of the city, limits of flexibility for a more distributed pattern of commercial development, concerns about potential for multifamily or apartment uses in commercial areas, and preference that only one of the 2 lots be rezoned. And so staff response to that is that the landowner requested the rezone as any landowner can. The landowner's vision for this is an innovation hub near OMIC with a mix of commercial, light manufacturing, R&D, and housing for faculty and students. Fully rezoning that site, the 2 different parcels, could improve site viability by attracting a strong anchor tenant. In other words, it's enough land to do something pretty interesting in terms of that mixture of development. Commercial land is spread throughout the UGB, but it's missing in the area of the rezone. So we'll show you on the next map. These green areas are the areas that are being proposed to be rezoned from something else, mostly industrial, to commercial. So this one here, 51 acres between the 2 different parcels, and I believe that that is the buildable section of that site. You can see in the sort of salmon pinky color, your existing zoned commercial land is all up and down Highway 30. There just hasn't been much around near the airport. That's going to matter more as the airport area develops. You can also see your vacant land. You have some vacant commercial land to the south, a little bit here to the north, but that's not within the city limits at this point. That is in county within the UGB. And then the rest of this is various types of industrial. Before I go on, are there questions about the proposed rezoning, or should I continue on?
I do have a question, Beth. So Kim Holmes here, Scappoose City Council. So I looked back, I was a member of the committee since its inception. So appreciate all your hard work and bringing all these pieces together. I did look back at one of the, I think it was the economic report from maybe November 1st, 2022. So it does show the Scappoose buildable lands inventory, and it does show that property, and it shows it almost entirely in the 100-year floodplain. How would that impact, I think, the usability of those two parcels? Or
That's a great question and observation. That is under a Dogami permit to be filled, and the landowner is currently filling it to 2 feet above the base flood elevation under that permit. So that is actively being filled. Once FEMA's processing letter of map revisions, once again, they will submit to have that removed from the floodplain. So that's in process. And most of it, I think the north end is not totally full yet, but the south end is getting quite close to being filled.
So it will, the 100-year floodplain will look different after that.
Correct. So basically, the majority of those two parcels then would come out of the floodplain once the maps are revised based on current elevations.
And not have to develop.
That's right.
Thanks.
Loki. Oh, that's good, bud.
Scott, could you mute yourself?
Sorry? Follow-up question. And I think, I'm not sure, it might be a Chris question. So when land is filled like that, because we've had some properties that have been filled, like you're saying, describing, it has caused, land is developed, there's certain development on that land. It's kind of been unpredictable. I mean, is that, I'm just wondering, when you fill a land, a wetland, does it make the ground steady? Would it affect the surrounding land? I don't know, even in like that.
Yeah, the fills are controlled somewhat in that, they're brought in lifts and compacted, and it's structural fill. And then, to further safeguard against settlement, what they've done in the past on that property is to surcharge it for a number of months and then monitor settlement to consolidate, some earlier fills that may not have been compactable. And then you know that, you can be reasonably sure that you're not going to have settlement that's going to cause issues. And we've heard of no issues from OMIP on their two buildings. So like we're having issues at all.
And almost all the land south of that has also been filled over the years. It has houses and developments. For the
Correct.
last 10, 15 years at least.
No complaint.
Yeah, no, there haven't been any issues. We actually went through an exercise of monitoring Charles T. Parker Way when the surcharge was happening on the OSG parcel because it was right at the end of Charles Parker Way. We were concerned that there would be some settlement that would bring the road down. And so Scott Parker paid for some additional survey work there so that we could all be sure that we weren't going to see some adverse effects from that surcharge, because I think it was 8 or 10 feet. And we didn't see any appreciable settlement there on the curbs or on any of the roads. So
Is OMIC built on fill? Is that had been all filled where OMIC is?
yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Beth.
Okay, so continuing forward. So when we look at your land need, taking land use efficiency measures into account, for the urban growth boundary period, the 2023 to 43 period, you've got a little surplus of commercial land. We're not showing industrial land on here, but it's got a surplus in all of these cases. You've got a deficit of land for housing and a little deficit of land for public uses. So when we look at your deficits, you've got about 43 acres of need for an urban growth boundary expansion. When we look at the next 30 years, you've got about 314 acres of land, mostly for housing, that are unmet need. And those would come under the urban reserves. So if we have a closer look at the commercial, with the question of should Scappoose rezone a portion or all of the 1 acres of land from industrial to commercial. Should you do that? Well, if you do that, then for the UGB, which I'm going to focus on here for a few moments, you rezone all that 51 acres. You've got a little surplus of commercial, 31 acres of commercial. If you don't rezone any of it, you've got a 10-acre deficit of land. If you rezone the southern lot, which is 27 acres, then you've got a small surplus of about 12 acres. So you're talking about, you know, an opportunity for some larger commercial development there at, in my opinion, I'm giving you my opinion now, at an area that's pretty interesting in Scappoose. So it's really, you know, here with Highway 30, with proximity to the airport. I think that is the major question. Is that the appropriate thing to do for Scappoose?
Beth, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Joe here. I mean, it's 24 and 27. I mean, it can't be 35 and 16 and redraw a line. I mean, what are our options there? It's either one or the other or both.
It's, at this point, it's one or the other or both, just because those are the existing parcel sizes, and I haven't evaluated, you know, what the minimum lot sizes are. It's still in the county, it's not in the city. So at this point, we are looking at, you know, either one or the other or both.
And Beth, in your experience, then what is the minimum amount of acreage to get one of those anchor tenants you're talking about?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of this goes to the vision for development there. I mean, if you've got an anchor tenant, but you don't have any space for anything else to happen there, then that isn't as helpful as it could be otherwise. I mean, to be a really interesting commercial use, I would think you have to be talking at least 20 acres, probably more.
And so I don't know if you want to hear from Chris, who's had quite a bit of commercial development experience previously, but he might be able to shed
Yeah, I'm
light.
just trying to get an idea, like an acre, those big parcels you see all around, what is that 40 acres, is that 50? I mean, if you're at 40 or you're not able to, what would you say, Chris?
Well, yeah, for a large retail commercial site, you know, like, you know, Jansen Beach is 75 acres. A Costco is about 15. And then you have some surrounding retail usually with that, like Hillsborough Costco, that whole site's like 25 acres with the out parcels. And you know, and those primarily have one major anchor with some smaller pad sites. So, you know, the Fred, this sort of bookends the town. I mean, Fred Meyer's and that whole commercial retail center is about 25 acres, including where Peak Performance is all the way south to Dutch Canyon. You know, if you wanted to add that in, there's so much out there. But it's, you know, you need sort of bit of mass just to, you know, get enough amenities in there to draw people to. So it's not just, you know, a single entity that is occupying that space.
Right, the Hillsborough Costco is like 22 acres roughly.
The whole, well, with the pad sites, it's roughly that, probably 25.
An idea.
Yeah.
That's fair. So I do have a question. So earlier it was stated that the landowner has a vision for this property. So what does that vision entail? How many acres of that vision?
So we do have the landowner here, and he planned to provide public testimony and go over some of that. Did you want to hear that now or later? Or do you want to get through that?
Well, that's
The chair.
Yeah, I have about 4 or 5 public comments, including that. I'd like to hear all that,
Okay.
but let's get through Beth and then we'll pick this right up in our regular meeting. Aaron?
Beth and Lori, so one of the questions that kind of comes to my mind is that So in 50 years, we have a projected surplus of 140 acres of industrial property. So why not look at rezoning some of that acreage in order to meet other demands for commercial and residential?
Well, we are looking at rezoning some of that for your commercial. That's what most of this that is in green that I'm pointing to is something that is industrial for commercial. The only rezone that we're talking about to commercial that is not industrial is this one to the south, which is R4 right now. So why not rezone more of your industrial land for residential or for commercial? Well, you went to a lot of work to get that industrial land there, and to get that industrial land with services, and it's just now at the point where development is really happening. I'm sure that Laurie has more to say about that than I do.
Well, again, I think that's it, that, you know, we're wanting to make sure that we do have some industrial land supply that can bring in those higher paying jobs that we would like to have so that people are able to work here and live here. So we want to be careful to not rezone too much and to make sure it makes sense.
If 40 acres surplus, averages 50 years, that's a lot of acreage.
Mhm.
So if you just take the question, why not look at some of those avenues at this point, especially in the context of Senate Bill 1537? So
All the lands, the 140 acres is right next to that out by the airport. So it would be lands within quarter mile from 51 acres already. And it's, so why not look at these? I mean, these are probably more attractive because they're a little closer to town than, because all that excess industrial land is out there, right? There's no excess industrial land anywhere else but north.
Correct.
So you could look at those, but these are probably the most two attractive, close lands that you would look at rezoning.
Right, and I would echo that with a commercial developer, they usually want siting, they want, you know, from Highway 30, they want to be able to see that commercial is there. The other thing to really consider is out of these two parcels, we're also working with what the landowners want their zone to do, which is a lot more favorable than trying to go against what the landowners are working with. As you mentioned, that industrial park, that landowner put millions and millions of dollars in that to make an industrial park. Whereas we have the property owner of this 51 acres that is wanting it to be more of that mixed use, expanded commercial, working with interested in that the economy of scale makes it a lot easier to develop than going against what they are working towards development. And it's a possibility. It's just for, I would say, for commercial, for industrial, it makes more sense the way that it is proposed for what the intended uses would be and those type of users.
but it's entirely possible that 10 years from now, that whole area is still empty.
Okay.
Yeah.
We could also run really fast. There's a huge shortage of industrial in Oregon in general, and that could turn pretty quick. I hear that all the time. There's a lot more interest factors because Portland's full and everywhere else. When I was in Eastern Oregon, that was the main thing I kept hearing from the governor and everybody else is we do not have industrial land. We have an industrial land shortage in the state of Oregon. So it is becoming much more attractive when they can find big parcels of that in big groups. And that is what industrial users are looking for. They don't want smaller parcels. They're looking for these huge areas.
And I will say that that is the story that we have across Oregon with industrial land, is you just don't have very much industrial land that is shovel ready or near shovel ready the way that your land is finally. You've done such a lot of work to get it there. It becomes quite an asset for the city potentially. And if in 10 or 15 years it's still not developing, you do have the choice to rezone it.
Okay, you can continue.
Okay. So I'm going to go about talking about the urban growth boundary expansion. This is a review of the state process for establishing urban reserves and urban growth boundary. They're roughly similar. So you had the determination of land need. We're going to show you we've shown you the identification of the preliminary study areas and the finalizing these study areas. I can talk about that briefly. But then there's a very specific priority scheme for what land you bring in first First, you bring in urban reserve and non-resource land. You don't have any of those. By the time we're done with this, you'd have urban reserve. And so when you're doing a UGB expansion next, you'd have priority 1 land, but you don't have that. What you do have is a lot of exceptions land, and that's land that is zoned for residential, commercial, or industrial uses by the county. You don't have any marginal land because Columbia County is not a marginal land county. And then you go to low value farmland or forest land and high value farmland or forest land last. So once you've identified enough land to meet your need, more than at least twice as much land as you would need to meet your need, then you go to the goal 14 factors. And these are the ways that you differentiate between your different study areas. So efficient accommodation of identified land needs. In other words, that the land you're talking about that you'd bring into the urban growth boundary or urban reserves is better going to meet your need for commercial land or for residential land. Orderly and economic provision of public facilities and services. In other words, looking at areas where it's easier and also less expensive to provide water, wastewater, transportation, that kind of service. Looking at a comparison of environmental, energy, economic, and social consequences. So you want to go to areas that have less environmental impact, that have better energy consequences, and better social consequences and economic consequences. And then looking at compatibility with the proposed urban uses in the nearby agricultural or forest land. So we've been considering all of these, and we've done a lot of focusing, especially on the first 2. Before I get to the maps, this is a little bit of what we shared with landowners when we met with them a few weeks ago. That land brought into the UGB, people maintain their rights based on what's currently allowed in county zoning. That doesn't change. Being inside the UGB increases future opportunities, but it doesn't force owners to develop. Property owners can apply for annexation once their property abuts city limits, making their property eligible to connect to city services. And property taxes do not change when land is brought into the UGB or the urban reserve. They only change after annexation. And you can see, you know, similar sorts of things for land placed in urban reserves. So when we talked with you back in December of 2024, we showed you a map very similar to this, and we told you that we were looking at areas 2, there's little area 2, area 4, 7, and 8 seriously for UGB expansion, and then the other areas that are listed here for urban reserves. We got direction from you to consider sub-area 3, which is north of the airport. It's got a fair bit of larger parcels of exceptions areas in it. What we are not considering is areas that are highly constrained. The constraints you see are these hash marks, and areas that are in low value and high value farmland. So this light green here, that's low value farmland. This dark green here is high value farmland. That is a lower priority. The only way we could get to that land, or the primary way we could get to that land, is if there wasn't enough land in exceptions areas within 1 mile of the urban growth boundary. There's quite a lot of exceptions areas that we haven't really seriously considered because they're further from the existing urban growth boundary. But we considered them in terms of including them in the study areas. So as we are narrowing the study areas to recommend UGB expansion areas and urban reserve areas, we really focused on the relative costs of services. This was something that we heard quite a lot from the SAC as well as from City Council and Planning Commission. Proximity to the existing urban growth boundary and connections with the existing city. And then considerations of farm activity and soil types, of course. So there are some areas here that are in this gray that were study areas that we considered and we ruled out because these other areas that we've highlighted do better on the considerations that we were talking about, which are also the considerations for the Goal 14 factors. So for instance, this area here, it's got terrible connection with the existing city because this is a parkland that is undeveloped and unlikely to develop. So, and some of the other areas are just highly constrained and difficult.
Beth,
Yes.
can we hold for a moment so we can end this work session and start our new meeting? We have some more people coming in. We need to bring a few more seats in.
Yeah.
And we'll put you right at the top of the agenda, right after probably roll call and pick up from the spot.
Okay, I will just stop sharing.
Okay, we'll be right back here. Okay.